Let's call the meeting to order. There are all but Tom here today, so we do have a quorum. Yay. Second order of business, consideration of the meeting minutes from April 20th. We all got those in our packet. Were there any concerns, questions, amendments, changes that anybody saw? If not, I would sure accept or entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
So moved.
All right. Any all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Public comments, items not on the agenda is the next. We do not have any public this month, it appears. There's nobody out there. So let's go on ahead and move to the next item, which is the review and consider a recommendation to City Council on approval of the fiscal year 27 annual action plan.
Sorry, routing myself to this computer here. Okay, well, this is our FY27 annual action plan. So this is the second year of our consolidated plan, City Steps 2030. Some of you were around for the 5-year plan and some of you were not. So as we go through this, I'll kind of fill in some blanks for you. The consolidated plan, City Steps 2030, is the document that sets our goals and strategies for the 5-year planning period. And then our annual action plan is something that we have to submit to HUD every year. It just kind of explains what we're going to do with our federal funding allocation. So submission of this plan is what gets us access to those CDBG and home funds that you looked at through the funding round. HUD finally announced our funding allocations. This shows you kind of where things are at between FY26 and FY27. Collectively, it's about a $15,000 decrease, less than 2% decrease total. So obviously, we always want more funding from HUD, but this year was particularly full of a lot of uncertainty, if you recall, all the ongoings at the federal level. So we are feeling grateful for all of that $1.1 million there. This slide is showing you the funding history from 1995 to present day. So the blue being our home funds, kind of gray, looks a little odd on the screen here, is our CDBG, and then the orange line is our admin funding. It looks fairly level until you adjust for inflation, then you can kind of see the downward trend of what we're working with here. So same information adjusting for inflation, so it's showing our purchasing power has been fairly steadily decreasing for the last 30 years. We know this, we're aware of it, and this trend is part of what was factored into the planning process for City Steps 2030. Looking at the bigger picture, we're trying to make sure, are we using these federal resources the most effectively we can? And then also just being in Iowa City, we have a lot of other local resources and other funding allocated for affordable housing. So maybe we can do something better with local funds that has less federal restrictions applied to it. And then we can use these federal funds for other programming that maybe has less restrictions. Our annual competitive funding, I hope you enjoy this photo cameo of all of you. We had about $440,000 of CDBG available for the competitive round, as you remember. Our funds are allocated each year through a combination of competitive funding and then also funds that are set aside for our programs that are approved in our consolidated plan. So we opened up the competitive round. You were all a part of this process. Applications were due in January. We did an applicant workshop for potential applicants. You all reviewed the proposals. You submitted questions. Staff submitted questions to the applicants as well. We all scored using that new software. We made our staff recommendations to you in March. And then at your March 23rd meeting, you developed funding recommendations for City Council. So the connection between the plan and the competitive funding round is we're basically taking your recommendations and we're feeding those into the annual action plan, and that's what we'll submit to HUD to say that this is what we're going to do with the funds that the city's awarded. The annual action plan is formatted in a way that's required by HUD, so it's not the most reader-friendly document. The most bang for your buck in the whole plan is this summary towards the end in the appendix. This is kind of the very concise breakdown of what we plan to do with those federal funds. You'll notice the amounts that these add up to are higher than our allocations, and that's because we're also allocating any program income or any unspent funds from other projects that maybe came in under budget. Program income would be if we have, let's say, a public facility project, the city would have a mortgage on the property, and if for whatever reason they decided to repay, we would get that money back, and we need to use it for a CDBG eligible purpose. So all that's kind of feeding into this. Taking you through our annual action plan summary here of projects. Aid to agencies, we fund a part of that program with CDBG funds. We're limited in the amount of CDBG funds that we can use for that purpose. So about $115,000 is what we'll be able to use this year. HUD caps that, so that's just a small portion of the total aid to agencies budget. And we anticipate that to go to neighborhood centers of Johnson County. Community housing development organizations, that is a factor of the home program. It's a special type of organization. We need to set aside 15% of our annual home allocation for an organization that can meet these requirements. The requirements would be related to capacity, board structure. It's a long list of things. A lot of communities actually struggle to have a local CHODO. So we're really lucky here in Iowa City that we have the Housing Fellowship that can meet that requirement. And this second project here is we can use 5% of our home allocation for operational funding to a certified CHODO. The next program is the City Owner Occupied Rehab Program. This is one I mentioned that would have been approved through the City Steps planning process. This is an annual program for the city that we set aside funds for annually. So this is for owner-occupied housing and people below 80% of area median income, and there's also priority given to those that are below 50% of area median income, seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities. The far right column there shows you that we are anticipating assisting 8 households with our CDBG rehab program. I would say that's a low estimate. Sometimes we can serve closer to 15. City Down Payment Assistance, this was a new program that was funded regularly through City Steps 2030. If you recall, for those of you that were around with City Steps 2025, the city used to apply through the competitive round to have a portion of funds to use for down payment assistance. And the program was so successful that through the consolidated planning process, we just decided, hey, let's set aside a portion of funds every year to keep this program going. The benefit of that is kind of knowing the stable budget, knowing if we have applicants in the queue that we have additional funding coming through that program. So that's gone pretty well. We also have competitive rental acquisition. That's the portion of funds that HCDC recommended $290,000 to the Iowa City Housing Authority. That'll be affordable rental housing operated by the city through the Housing Authority. Again, this is the next project is that 15% reserve I mentioned, the Community Housing Development Organization reserve, and that will go to the Housing Fellowship, $56,000. They anticipate using that for rental rehab. Probably some of you or other homeowners in the area received a lot of hail damage, and I know the Housing Fellowship has said their housing stock was impacted by that. So rehab funds can be used for replacement of roof, different projects like that, just to improve rental housing in the community. The next item is that $108,000 that ended up unallocated because we didn't receive enough applications through the CDBG round. We already mentioned this in a staff memo, but we recommended it towards the city or a local CHODO acquiring an additional rental unit. We could, as we mentioned, operate another competitive funding round. That takes a lot of time to get through that process, as you know, so kind of allocating that towards a project now helps us meet our spending deadlines through May 2nd is actually our timeliness test. Public facilities projects, these are both projects that you reviewed. If you remember Reach for Your Potential, they asked for $20,000 to renovate a childcare center. And then Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County, they're doing some improvements at their existing facilities, $24,000, again, serving children and then other neighborhood services at both of their centers as well. Any questions about any of these projects before I proceed? Okay. So the timeline, I learned earlier today that HUD has not passed a budget on time since 1997. That was much longer than I thought. So we're a little bit off target where we normally would be. Typically, we would have our annual action plan approved by City Council in early May, so we're a little bit beyond that. We opened up our 30-day public comment period April 17th, and it will go through tomorrow, the City Council meeting. You will look at this plan, talk about it, and consider a recommendation to City Council tonight. Tomorrow in bold, that's the City Council meeting, and then once we have that final approval, we can submit to HUD. The caveat there being that once we submit to HUD, we're waiting for the plan to be approved and our grant agreements to be able to proceed with projects. Our fiscal year begins July 1st, and we start the environmental review process or anything that we can do prior to that. But typically it's fall, October before we actually get our funding and our grant agreements from HUD. So that speaks a little bit to the nuance of why it's important to have projects that can move along, because if we're not getting our funds until October and our timeliness test is in May, we have to it's a little bit of an art form to make sure that we can spend our funds in time. That is the end of my slides. I would be asking for any comments you have, questions about the plan, or ultimately staff is looking for a recommendation to City Council to approve.
It's interesting that sometimes the funds aren't available till October, and they have to be done by May. So then, there's weather in between October and May, like winter. Yeah. So for some rehab projects and stuff, that can be difficult.
Very difficult.
Any other input or discussion or thoughts or questions or?
It looks good.
Yeah.
Can you please go back to the table? So I think there is an amount here that is gonna probably require some proposals or competitive bidding or something.
Would you mind speaking into your microphone? Sorry, I'm just having a tough time
sorry.
hearing you.
Yes, sorry. So can you explain a little bit more when you talk about the Community Housing Development Organization rental acquisition, the 108 that we thought we could allocate to proposals, but we did not, and the council has never said anything about this. Yeah.
Yep. So our staff recommendation would be you sort of have two paths, as we explained in the staff memo. If we don't get enough applications, we could open another competitive funding cycle, which would be what we did before. We put out the notice of funding opportunities. We send it to our nonprofits. We cross-post it. We get the marketing out there. We would do another full scoring funding round, that whole process. That process takes several months to do. So our staff recommendation was that either the city through the housing authority or through our certified housing development organization, they call it a CHODO, would acquire a rental unit in lieu of going through that competitive process again.
Okay. The other question I have is on an allocation on aid to agencies, neighborhood centers, and I was reading the annual plan, and it looks like you reached a lot of organizations. There's very many of them. And I was wondering if there was any interest from those other organizations regarding this allocation, or it was just one applicant.
The confusing part of aid to agencies, and you'll get a full dose of this soon with the new process. So maybe I have a slide here that would make it's easier to explain. Is this showing up for you at all? No. Nothing?
Yeah.
Okay. So the aid to agencies budget it's sort of three prongs now. It's part CDBG funds, part local general funds, and then upcoming it's going to be partially lost funded as well. So the piece in this annual action plan is only looking at a very tiny portion of that aid to agencies budget. So if you actually look in the council packet tomorrow, you'll see the allocations for all the legacy agencies and also the non-legacy agencies that you recommended funding for at your March meeting. City Council is going to be reviewing and approving all of those allocations. So there's actually quite a few organizations that are getting funding, but this federal annual action plan, we're only looking at the tiny piece of federal funding that's going to that one agency. The reason we select neighborhood centers or an organization like that is because they have the agency capacity to administer federal funds. There's a lot of extra paperwork that comes with that, income surveys, making sure that all the clients are meeting our income guidelines. So in this plan, it looks like only neighborhood centers is being funded, but that's because they're only receiving the CDBG portion of the funds.
Okay, I get that. I was just wondering because I don't know if HUD looks at it and says I only see one organization. If there's no qualifier somewhere, additional statement. But you deal with this quite often, so you know better than me. Yeah, why one agency appears and others not, or there's no process explaining anything. But
It's a really good
I get
question.
it. I really get the importance. So.
Yeah, at the council meeting tomorrow, the nice thing with that will be we'll be looking at the annual action plan and we'll be looking at the aid to agencies item. So they'll kind of feed together, but I can see how that would be confusing if you're only looking at this. So thank you for that.
Do you know tomorrow will the work session just have a discussion about aid agencies?
I think it's on the regular agenda towards the end. The work session, I believe, is about Summit Street tomorrow.
Okay.
And then aid to agencies is on the formal agenda after the annual action plan item.
Okay.
Would you like to join?
I can't make it tomorrow.
What time-
Unfortunately.
What time is it again? Is it 5:30 or 6?
It starts at 6, yeah. We're always towards the end for whatever reason, so.
I guess I would just say too that I think that it's smart to not reopen another full funding application for that one allotment and just letting the city then move forward.
Thanks.
Where I work, my day job, we're at Chodo. So I've written a couple of Chodo applications and we have been at Chodo for 2 years now. So I know that it's a pretty stringent process and to keep up with it. So I definitely, go with that recommendation.
It's a long list of requirements for sure.
Yes, it is.
And putting it in the action plan is just a placeholder that allows us the time to either find one for the city or to find a partner, a Chodo partner to do it. I mean, that's why it's in there. Currently, it's just a placeholder. We're approving it as a future outlay in the
Yeah, to
2027.
submit our annual action plan, we need to program all the funds. We can't submit it without that portion of funds, so it just helps us move a little bit quicker.
Yeah. Well, if nobody has any other statements, I would sure accept a motion to make that recommendation from staff to council for tomorrow. Can I get a motion first?
Oh, motion.
I need to
Moved-
entertain that. I can't
moved
make
to
motions. All right,
approve.
and a second. From the other side.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brianna. Appreciate it. I've gone dark up here, but I believe the next thing is staff updates. I believe is the next agenda item.
Yes, in the packet, there was one update. I believe, Amos, you had requested some information related to the landlord incentive pilot program. So Rachel Carter, the executive director of the Housing Authority, provided some information in a memo. She also added some information about the tenant-based rental assistance that we just saw in the project summary. That's another program that operates annually now through our consolidated plan with a portion of home funds. And then she also provided a status update on the FY26 rental acquisition where they were awarded CDBG funds and they acquired another rental unit. So that's the gist of what I have there. And then I was just also going to mention the council meeting tomorrow, but we already covered that. So the other item on the council agenda is new appointments of commissioners. So more to come.
Will that be voted on tomorrow? Am I done in this month or am I done next month?
You and Sarah both have terms ending at the end of June. I saw both of your applications in there, and then City Council tomorrow will consider whoever they decide to appoint. They could reappoint both of you. They could appoint somebody else. There wasn't many applicants in the pool.
Okay. And then, last is commission updates. Anybody have any input or thoughts or? What do we have on the schedule for next month? I guess is a good question.
Off the top of my head, I'm not for sure. Usually we would try to be winding down in case anyone's term ends, and then we would start again in July. I'd have to probably ponder that a little bit. Do you have anything of interest?
I'm wondering if we even.
I'm interested in the Lynn Street property, and if there's any additional updates or if there's any way that the commission can weigh in or advise.
That's a good question. I'm interested in that as well. I will find out if there's opportunity for that. Are you proposing to not meet in June or?
No, I mean, just if we don't have anything on the agenda, aside from, who got appointed or who didn't get appointed.
It's up
I
to
don't
you.
know
I
that
don't
we
have
have-
anything time sensitive if that's the question.
Well, why don't we see what develops here in the next week or so, and then we can make the decision to call it off in June if we need to.
Amos, you look like you have a question.
Yeah, can you confirm for me? I don't know if I went ahead into the other schedules. The House, the Human Rights Commission, we got an input. I think you sent it to us. I don't know if it was an agenda or it was just a.
You had asked for some information related to complaint data, and I
Yeah.
talked to the Office of Human Rights Director, and they timely shared their full human rights report that included some complaint data. If you had questions, we could have their staff come in and answer questions, or if you have ideas on kind of the shape of what you're looking for, that would be helpful.
Can I talk about it right now, even though it's not part of the agenda? Okay. Yeah. It looks really good data, and but we as a HDC we are interested in housing, so we will suspend the others. And it looks like every year is about 30% of the complaints are due to housing issues and discrimination in particular. So the data is about, I think, discrimination. What I was worried about is that here in our commission we are worried about other things too. Yeah, and inspections. And so complaints might not necessarily be about discrimination. They could be about other things. So if they can help us, I don't know if this is so hard, but I believe what the complaint was about. Then as a commission, we can see what the complaint was about, the particular complaint in housing area, and how those were resolved, levels of difficulties of resolving those things or not, because I think it's part of the commission to look into those issues too. We are not just allocating money. We are also dealing with other issues. So if the data could probably include such details and could be furnished in a similar way today, they don't have to come here, but just to present to the commission so that we see where
Similar information, but just housing specific.
it's housing specific, but the details of the types of complaints.
It sounds like you're also interested in like the resolution process.
Yes, yeah. What was resolved, what wasn't resolved, and why, and
I will ask and see if they can break that information out. I'll get back to you.
Yeah, and I guess I would be curious if when it comes to those kinds of complaints, if most of those complaints are coming at the application process, or if they're coming after these individuals are already tenants, because those are two separate issues as well. Is it current tenants that are finding housing complaints? Yeah, like Amos is pointing out, like what are their complaints? I mean, is it just discrimination, or is it lack of upkeep? Is it and especially it's much harder obviously on the application side, because that's before they actually get housing, and that's more of a statewide issue as far as discrimination for that. But yeah, it would be nice if we could get it broken down into what were those complaints more specifically involved in. Yeah.
If the staff could come, it might be helpful also to find out. I believe there's a state commission, correct?
I think so.
It used to be if there was a discrimination complaint from a tenant, basically racial discrimination, that automatically had to go to the state. Mm-hmm. So it might be able, if they could get some information from the state also, to see how those are resolved.
I will ask. And if I don't know how long it's been since we've had human rights here. Does anyone remember?
Been a while.
Has it? Yeah. Maybe with this next fiscal year, we can work that back into. It seems like maybe you have questions that I wouldn't be able to answer. So it might be helpful, like you said, to have staff here.
And if they may include the demographics, because some probably are the elderly persons, some of them are youth who have been homeless or away from home for a while, and those are the areas we are trying to target. Yeah, it's not just race, but there could be a lot of other people involved in there.
All right. Anything else? If not, we can all theoretically get home by 6. I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Ready.